What's up, y'all? Welcome to the video. Today I'll be showing you the next step in creating our survival shooter, and we'll be covering how to implement our weapon class as well as changing the weapon component to shoot a line trace instead of a projectile. We left off last time with our FPS controller set up with animations as well as a way to attach objects that contain a weapon component to our player. So with that, let's get into setting up our weapon class. Okay, so with our weapon class, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go into our C++ classes, and we're going to want to create a new C++ class, and we're going to make this inherit from the actor class. I'll just call this weapon. Okay, and before we want to get into any real implementations, we're going to want to set up our header file for this. So, first things first, we're going to want to assign a mesh to our actor. So, this is going to be a visible defaults only category to mesh. And then we're just going to make this a U static mesh component. I'm just going to call this MP mesh. Okay. Now in our weapon class, we are also going to want some visual and audio cues so that we know what's going on. So first off, we're going to start with our sounds. So for these, we're going to top them with a U property header of edit anywhere, blueprint, read write, and for the sounds, we're going to make a category sound. And the first sound that we're going to need is our shooting sound. So we're going to call this a U sound base pointer MP fire sound, and do some commenting here with that. Weapon sounds, and we're going to copy paste this, and the other sound we're going to need is when our gun has run out of ammo. So that empty clicking sound that a gun makes when it's empty, we're going to have a sound for that as well. Now another thing that we're going to need is environmental sounds. So when a gun impacts, like say a wall or something, and it doesn't hit, say, an enemy, we're going to want a audio cue for that. So we're going to make property. This is also going. Oops. This is also going to be edit anywhere, blueprint, read write, category sound. And since there's multiple different types of environmental sounds that we can have, we're actually going to store them all in a T array. So this will be a T array of U sound base. And we'll just call this MP environmental sounds. There we go. And that should cover all of the sounds that we need. Now, some other things is we're going to need a muzzle offset for our weapon. So offset, and we'll just call this F vector MV muzzle offset. And we're going to make the default for this a F vector 100 .f 0 and time .f. And this is going to need a header for that as well. And this will be in category gameplay. Next, we are going to need another audio cue for showing that our gun has shot. So for that, we are going to add a muzzle flash, and we are going to use a Niagara system MP muzzle flash, and for this our header is going to be SFX. And the reason that it is yelling at us right here is because we don't have the header in our includes. So actually, we're also going to need to include our UTP or our TP component. And we are going to include Niagara function library.h. And now we should be able to access that. And then next we are going to, of course, have our constructor, which we'll do some stuff with in our CPP implementation. And some other things that our weapon is going to need is it's going to need a weapon component reference. So UTP weapon component. And we'll just call this MP weapon component. And lastly, we are going to need some ammo variables for our weapons. So we are going to need our clip size and our maximum ammo that our weapon could possibly have. So we're going to comment this ammo sizes. And this is going to be a blueprint assignable. Gameplay. And we're going to name this MI clip size is equal to 8. And we'll do the same thing for our max ammo. And our default for that is going to be 80. And it seems that I can't spell. I'm going to change that to ammo sizes and visible defaults only. Now getting into our CPP file here, we're first going to want to start with our constructor. So first we're going to want to make our MP mesh equal to a create default subobject. It's going to be a useStatic mesh component. And we'll call this weapon mesh. And after that is created, we're going to want to set up the attachment. And we're going to want to attach this to the root component. So the first thing that is going to attach to the actor itself is going to be this mesh right here. And lastly, we're going to want to also create our weapon component. So MP weapon component is going to be equal to a create default subobject of UTP weapon component. And we'll just call this weapon component. Okay. Last thing we're going to want to do in our CPP file here is we're going to want to assign weapon component variables. So we're going to want to take a lot of the variables that we're passing in from our header file into here, into our weapon component. So when we're firing, we can actually use those variables. So first thing we're going to pass in is, so empty weapon component, and this fire sound is going to be equal to our MP fire sound. Now the other things that we want to pass in, we do not yet have in the weapon component. So we're actually just going to go add those real quick. So things we're going to need is environmental sound, pretty much all of this. And we're going to go to our header. And seems they already have a muzzle offset, but we're going to overwrite that with our own that's coming from our weapon class. So going into our weapon, and we're going to change this to the fire sound. Next, we're going to want to add in our empty sound. Empty sound. Empty sound. Our environmental sounds. Our muzzle offset. Muzzle offset. And lastly, our muzzle flash. Okay, that should be good. Going into our CPP part of this, we did rename the fire sound, so just so we're not getting any weird compiler errors. Fire sound. Fire sound. Muzzle offset. Now that should be good as it is. We're going to change this a little bit later in the video, but for now we're just going to change these to be like this. Okay, that should be good. So if we go back into Unreal and we try to compile this, and our build failed. Why is it doing that? MP Muzzle Flash. Right, because we did not change our weapon component Muzzle Flash to also be that. So if we go into the header here, nope, we changed it. We forgot to also add our header for that. And now we actually won't need this because we are including this, which has this. And so we don't have to repeat the includes. And make sure this is fine too. Yep. Perfect. Now, if we go into our weapon right here, we're going to create a blueprint version of it. And we're going to call this BP pistol. And we're going to put this in our blueprints. Save that there. Go into our mesh class. We're going to assign the mesh to be our pistol. The component. And now we have our pistol weapon. Now if we go in and assign the different variables, MP fire sound, pistol shot, and gun empty. We can also add our environmental sounds. Make a ground impact 1, 2, and 3. Our muzzle flash, which we do not have yet, we are going to set that up. But if we go now and we go into our controller and we set our BP pistol to be our player pistol. And then we hit play. We should now be able to do this. Now you're also noticing, why is it messing with my movement? That is because the actor has collisions on it, and so we are going to want to disable those. So here, if we type in collisions, set to block all dynamic by default, we're going to set that to no collision. Also playing our pistol. Very good. And the reason it is not shooting the default projectile is because we did not include that in our weapon class. So it is not actually being passed into the weapon component. It's left at default, so it is not going to shoot anything until we set that. So since we're not going to be doing that anyways, we're just going to get right into implementing our line tracing, since that's what we're going to be replacing anyways. Okay, now in our weapon component class, the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take away the need to use our projectile class. So do that. And change this to try and line trace. We're also going to want to take away the overriding of our muzzle offset, since that's set in our weapon class. I'll want to take away this fire animation as well, since we're going to be using that via our player controller. And in our header here, we're going to take away our projectile class and our fire animation. And that should be good. And so with that, we're going to take away this spawn actor call, as well as this actor spawning params. And we're going to get right into setting up our line trace. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set up our collision query params. So set up query params. And what this is going to do is we're going to set what actors to ignore, so we don't possibly have our line collide with something that we don't want it to. So if you accidentally have it collide with the player, it doesn't mess that all up. So collision query params, and we'll just call this query params. And we're going to do query params dot add ignored actor, and we're going to make that player controller get pawn. So it is now ignoring our player, and it won't possibly collide with that. Next, we're going to want to set up our hit result. So once we cast out our line trace, we're going to put that information from whatever it hits back into this object. So set up hit result, and this is going to be an F hit results out hit, and now we can set up our line trace. So in order to do this, we're going to do world line trace single by channel, and we're going to feed in our out hit, the start of the line, which is going to be our spawn location, our end, which is going to be spawn location, plus our spawn rotation dot vector. So we're getting the directional vector from our rotation, and we're going to multiply this by 3000 so that we can set its magnitude to be quite far. And next we are going to put in our channel to our trace channel, and that's going to be E collision channel ECC, do ECC pawn. And then we're going to feed in our query params. All right, now that should be all set. We're going to go back into Unreal, compile. And we are not able to see our line trace quite yet because it doesn't really do anything. So we're casting out our line, but we don't have it mess with any collisions, and we're also not drawing any debug lines to see is our line going in the right direction. So we're actually going to draw a debug line real quick just so we can see that things are going in the right place. So in order to do that, we're going to do a draw debug line, and we are going to feed in our world, our spawn location, and our spawn location plus the directional vector times its magnitude, which is going to be the start and end of the line. We're going to pass in a color. We're going to pass in red. We're going to put in some of these other values here. So we're going to feed in false f5.f. That should be good. Go back to Unreal. And now we have our debugs line working, and it seems they're going in the right direction. Perfect. Okay, so now that we have our line tracing working, we're going to get into setting up a visual representation of our shot by implementing our particle system. So in code, we're going to try and spawn our particle system. And if our MP muzzle flash is not null pointer, then we'll spawn our muzzle flash. Now we're going to get these controller and rotation up here. And to spawn our particle system, we're going to do U Niagara function library spawn system at location, and we're going to pass in our world, our muzzle flash, spawn location, and our spawn rotation. Now this isn't going to work right away because we don't have our muzzle flash right yet, so let's go and set that up. So for setting up our particle system, the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to go to our assets folder, go to our particles folder, right click, and we're going to create an FX Niagara emitter. And we're going to copy from a template that the engine gives us, and just for simplicity, we're just going to use a directional burst. We'll call this NE Muzzle Flash. And we're going to change some values in here. So for this, we don't want gravity enabled. Just want this to be a burst that just fades out. And we're going to want to change our color to something a little bit more fiery. So we're just going to make this 0.5. And that should give us a nice orange color. Cool. Okay. Now from there, we're going to want to create a Niagara system. And we're going to use our muzzle flash as a template for that. NS muzzle flash. Make sure this is looking good. And we shouldn't have to change any values in here. Just keeping it very simple, just using some templates with different colors and whatnot, just so we can show a visual representation of our shot. So with that, we can now go into our pistol and we can set our muzzle flash to the system we just created. And now if we hit play, we can now see our particle system. Alright, so that is going to cover everything for this video. By now we have our FPS controller set up, our weapon class implemented, and our modified weapon component class that utilizes line tracing instead of projectiles. In the next video we're going to set up our heads-up display user interface, and we're going to connect some values to it such as our player health and weapon ammo. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.